Hello and welcome to Work Reimagined. This is the podcast that explores some of the big questions about how work really works. I'm Lee Ward, and each episode I'm going to bring you a guest from the world of work and workplace culture to discuss how work can be reimagined to make the experience better for everyone. This week I'm joined by Tom Oxley from Bamboo Mental Health, and Tom is someone that's not only an expert in workplace mental health, but someone that brings a deeply personal perspective to the conversation as well. And Tom's going to go into more detail in our discussion. We talk about what organizations can do to truly support their people's mental health, not only just through policies and perks, but by truly understanding the root causes and working with specialists like Tom to create some really meaningful change. Tom is going to share what's working from his experience, what he's seeing out there in organizations, as well as what's not, and why this conversation, as much as it's moved on in recent years, is still a conversation that we need to be having. It's an honest, insightful discussion, and it's full of practical ideas for leaders and teams to take away. And for the first time, we are recording this episode in video. So if you'd rather watch than listen, then you can find us on YouTube. But for now, here is my conversation with Tom Oxley about mental health at work. Tom, thanks for joining us on the podcast for what I know is going to be a really important conversation. Before we get into that, though, to kick us off, would you be able to give our listeners a little introduction to yourself and what inspires your work?
Oh, what inspires me? I think that we've all got a desire to work well and to be well in ourselves. But what inspires me goes a little bit deeper. My own experiences, I was doing really well, high functioning in work. A doctor just wrote stress, anxiety, depression on a note and gave it to me in a 7.5 minute consultation. And I was sitting in the car park trying to figure out what the hell to do next. So that moment probably inspires me. Thankfully, I had an organisation that cared and a managing director who had my back. So I had those things. But other than that, I was sort of scrabbling around to find out what all this stuff was about. Mental health at work. This was 15 plus 20 years ago, and the conversation has moved on a lot since then. So I still at that moment sitting in the car park going, what now? Is probably my biggest inspiration. And my second biggest inspiration will be my daughter, who, being a alpha generation, tells me much more than I could learn on LinkedIn about how to have conversations around mental health and how to be emotionally intelligent and all those things. She's way ahead.
If we talk about honest feedback in the workplace, I think that's definitely somewhere you could go to get that honest feedback, wouldn't it?
God, is she? One line she's used not so long ago was, "Dad, you're not listening to me. You're just saying what you want to say after I've said something." It's like, just nowhere to hide.
Yeah, totally seen. So in terms of that inspiration then, Tom, so you work with organisations around mental health and supporting their teams in terms of your day-to-day?
Yeah. I advise the organisation rather than individuals, and I'm commonly used by HR directors, health and safety sometimes, occupational health occasionally, and sometimes business owners. And my belief is that any employer can support any employee on mental health. I do that I review organisations and I do talks and training.
Fantastic. So that is our topic today. And like I said at the start, a really important topic around mental health in the workplace. You said there about your own experiences sort of 15 years ago, and that really provided that inspiration and brought it to a head for you. And you said the conversation has progressed on from then in terms of what organisations are doing. But from your viewpoint, why is this still such an important conversation that organisations, leaders, managers need to be having?
Well, we're not getting it right yet, although the general conversation is positive and leaning in the right direction. And we know that half of our lost time is due to often work-related mental health problems from our staff. So if we were running a machine or a factory environment, and one of those machines was responsible for half our lost time through illness or injury, we'd sure as heck stop that machine, run a root cause analysis, notify the executive, come up with a plan, make it safe before we turn that machine on again. And that's my view on mental health at work. Perhaps we should actually treat people a bit more like machines. Then we would unplug them and test them and make sure they're all right, before using them.
And as much as you said, the conversation's moved
Yeah.
on, Tom, in terms of what organisations are doing and looking to do to support their teams. Do you see the prominence of mental health and mental health experiences that people are going through? Has
Yeah.
that risen? Because you hear about workloads are as high as they've ever been, people are as busy as they've ever been, the kind of distractions within the workplace and outside of the workplaces
Yeah.
are greater than ever. So do you see a greater prominence of mental health experience, even if the conversation has moved on?
Stats from the health and safety executive will say that number is generally going up, whereas numbers around what we call general safety stuff, musculoskeletal injuries, slips, trips, falls, that kind of thing, that's plateauing. So we know that both by incidence and by numbers, the numbers are going up, which is a bit curious given that there's been a lot more attention on it. So perhaps we're not doing the right things or looking in the right area. Perhaps we're using interventions that sound good but aren't actually preventing anything. Often the things that we do in an organisation are lagging. So they wait for people to become unwell and then we will try and support people. Or the interventions we put in early, like, I don't know, maybe the classic ones that people get snippy about, things like yoga classes or meditation and stuff like that. Well, I don't know if they're really going to the root causes of this stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I do the research piece that I do, is to really get data on where the hot spots are in organisations, the real root causes of the workplace stress. That's the stuff we've got to prevent.
And we'll come on to, because I know you've got lots of examples where organisations are doing this really well and are supporting their teams really well. And we will come on to some practical things that organisations and leaders can do as well. But in terms of your work with organisations and where your support is most needed, when you go and work with an organisation, what does that look like? What type of things are you doing with those?
Yeah. So when I'm used well, they will invite me in with questions and go, we know this is a thing. Can you tell us more about it? They give me access to their people. And I really try and understand what it's like to work for an organization, what the stressors are according to the different roles and jobs they've got there, and what type of support and work we need to do around that will help. So sometimes organizations have got support, but people aren't using it because there's a problem with the reputation of the HR team or accessing it or something like that. So in an ideal world, people will get me to do an external, independent, confidential survey. They'll get me to interview people who've been sick with poor mental health while working for them. They'll let me rummage through the underwear drawers of their HR policy set and their absence process, and then I'll talk to leaders and I use all those different data points and come back to an organisation and say, this is what it's really like for you. This is what it's like to be in your workplace, to experience mental ill health. This is what the support is like. This is what they think of the leadership. These are some of the root causes. This is why they're not talking to you. And when we've got to sort of turn into the storm and look at some of those painful things. And from that, I can work out where they want to be and what good looks like and what needs to happen in the middle in terms of interventions.
And do you get a sense, I know when we spoke briefly before we started recording this episode, you said that at the start you had a lot of requests to go in and talk about what mental health is. Do you feel there's a better understanding from organisations now of what it means, or are they seeing it as those extreme cases where people are off and absent and are taking kind of sickness? Are they seeing the whole sort of spectrum of mental health?
Yeah, I think people they understand when people are so-called properly sick.
Yeah.
And they're off and there's a doctor's note and they generally follow procedure. But it's for the group of people that they might have a long-term condition they can generally manage, but there's a lack of adjustments. Or there might be people who are not sure or they don't have the language around their mental health. And the manager knows that something's up, but there's something wrong in the workplace. And typically we'll find people are absent, or they might be making mistakes, or they might not look like the team player. There may be behavioural problems, or there's capability or grievance type stuff. So by the time it raises its head in the workplace, the person has become a problem. And that's what people say. And we're not very good at dealing with that. We're not very good at seeing the person. We're not very good at applying the things that are available to us, the tools. So that's where somebody has a difficulty. It might be caused by work. It might be caused by life. About 50% of people, it will be a combination of things. And we don't really sort it out. We tend to just put in little measures, the most sort of convenient and easy measure, and hope that will sort things, but it doesn't really work. So we get in a big conversation, but we're not probably targeting the right kind of support. Probably through managers is the best place for it. There's some hope here as well, though. So when there is proactive wellbeing support by the manager population, I see data quite a bit where you can reduce incidences of poor mental health by up to 80%. So it's very significant.
Yeah.
It's not just about the absence, but it's about this kind of the team playing. It's about the mistakes. It's about the attitude. It's about morale. It's about all that kind of thing. By 80%, if you get this right.
That's a huge impact. And again, yeah, it made me think when you said about the focus on the person, there's been a bit of a running theme between a few of the episodes that we've run on Work Reimagined about often the approach that people might take is, we've got a challenge, how do we fix the person? And I know we had a conversation with Joe Gray when we were talking about workplace proactivity, about people jump into, let's fix the person, let's try and make the person more proactive in that instance, neglecting or ignoring the impact that the environment has on that situation. And I think it seems pretty similar there, that organizations need to be thinking about this in the whole rather than looking at it individually for certain people. Would that be fair?
So I think there are definitely things an organization needs to do for itself. And then there's that bit where, despite all the good efforts, life will turn up and give people a bit of a kicking. And that's the moment where I think we need to get curious about what that individual needs and requires. And that act of compassion, so I've got an instinct to help somebody, but also I'm bringing a empathy as a process. So I'm trying to tune into what this individual needs and what their life is like and that kind of thing. And I keep a professional distance. I'm not trying to fix them and solve them like your parent. That's the parent-child relationship. We're not doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to fix and rescue them like a mate might want to. I'm not a therapist, as like a counsellor or psychotherapist might be. So what have I got there? Well, I can show up for that person. I can pay attention. I can hear them out, and I can be more of a coach and say, okay, Tom, thanks for telling me that story. That sounds really difficult. I just want to let you know that we're going to try and support you here, and we're on your side. Do you know what help you need? Do you know what this looks like when we get it right for you? Do you know if there's anything that you require in this short term just to get you through this difficult time? So that's one of the ways we can do it, is by actually seeing. This is quite difficult for managers to get, because managers are expected to be the technical experts here. But when it comes to mental health, there's much more expertise in the person who we're trying to support. So you're better off going in with the right questions rather than the right answers, and all the answers.
Yeah. Great point, and great practical advice there, because like you said, often as a manager you feel you need to go in and the best support I can give is to fix the problem and solve this for the person, whereas actually taking more of that coaching approach to it.
Yeah, and that's quite hard for an organisation to get that right, like across, if you're multi-sites, the scores of people under one manager and that kind of thing, it's pretty inconvenient. Let's be honest, for an organisation or a manager to now have this massive, complex, scary topic on the desk.
Yeah.
So commonly they might go, well, why don't we give it to the nice woman in HR? And it's sort of got. But if an organisation just sees that kind of stuff, and I do mean woman, because often you find men going, this is not my subject, because it hasn't been a subject in which males can participate. So often given to a woman in the team or a woman in HR, office manager, that kind of thing. Then leadership will dismiss it as something that they need to own as a core business objective. It feels to them like a campaign or a soft skill that's not their domain. And as a result of it, the people in your organisation will see it a mile off and go, they don't actually care. They've got all the posters up, and there's some fruit in a basket, and there's the classic things you'd expect. There's a webinar once a year, but if they're not seeing it on a day-to-day basis, and it's not showing up in how we treat people when they're unwell or when life is giving them a bit of a kicking, then they're not going to believe it for a minute. Classically, you've got a lot of managers in an organisation whose pay and performance structure is built solely on operational delivery and out. So you won't find personnel related hard objectives in an individual's performance review. And there's often not any feedback up from the team. And so why am I going to do it? If it's more important for me to make sausages or sell stuff or whatever it is, if that's in my pay review, my performance review, that's what I'm going to do.
So you're going to focus on.
And as a result of it, we get that they get those numbers right. We're disregarding the people who are making the sausages or selling the stuff.
Yeah, going back to that point you made there, and you said obviously predominantly you see this with men dismissing it, but almost veering away from it because of a bit of fear. Where you talk about root cause, where do you think that root cause is? Is it an experience in terms of having this conversation? Is it the vulnerability to need to have this conversation? Where do you feel that that root cause of veering away from exploring this?
The big one is because this shows up in general health as well, but we're not great at talking about stuff, and that is thousands of generations of a different version of being male and being masculine. So it's about toughing it out. It's about carrying on at all costs, about carrying the load. It's about providing and those kind of things. So if things get in the way of that male operational delivery, then I'm going to try and squeeze it out. And so you'll get more maladaptive coping, drinking, drugs, the rest of it. But it could, promiscuous relationships, gambling, comes in many forms. It might even be work itself. So we try and cope, and that's definitely one of the things that's happening here. There's also, I think, a lot of emphasis on all men just need to talk. And whilst I think talking is a very good step in the process, we need to recognize it as just one moment to getting the right kind of support. So you say, all you need to talk, just call me, tell me, and men are still killing themselves. There's still too many, and it's on the up, despite taking medication, despite doing the talking and all this kind of thing. So I don't have all the answers, but I think we need to review male masculinity and male health and those kind of things quite seriously to get that right, just sort of change that narrative. Don't get me wrong, I think people do need to talk.
Yeah,
but it's a first stage, and we've got to have an organisation needs to understand what it does with its people when they start talking.
Yeah, and I think that just emphasised how big a topic this is that we're trying to cover in a short episode. You've touched a few times about organisations when they're doing this well, when they use you to maximise the value of you going in to support them, looking at that real root cause analysis. What else are you seeing organisations that are tackling this, supporting their teams in the best possible way? What kind of practical things do you see them doing beyond the fruit bowl, the yoga class, the posters, etc.?
I'm being unfair about that because I think they're quite, they're pleasant things to have, but I think you earn the right to do those when you do the core stuff. So what's the core stuff? Well, a few years ago, I reviewed 46, 47 different reviews of what was successful in organisations. And it's about shifting this from a nice to have into a proper organisational competency. Like we've done with safety. We've done this with safety. So we've got that mindset shift. Leaders have got to show up. They can't just give it to the nice people in the wellbeing team. Because when they talk about it, when they're involved, they cascade permission to the rest of the organisation. We've got a risk assessment to make sure work is safe, to understand the root causes, and sometimes they're surprising. The root causes of poor mental health at work. We've got trained managers. We've got HR that are on point. They're super trained and they've got good policies and they've looked at their procedures, things like that. And then we can communicate to staff and work with our people with getting feedback on what's working, what's not working, and bring them in. So that's when it goes well, mindset, leaders, managers, HR, comms, you see there's quite a lot of roles, quite a lot of areas of the organisation this needs to touch to get it right.
And just shows how it needs to be an organisation approach rather than this is one person's piece of work that they're going to lead a campaign or they're going to lead some communication within the organisation.
Or worse. Why don't we just send a couple of people on a mental health first aid course?
Yeah.
Not a bad idea to have people who aren't managers available for those kind of conversations, but a small amount of people, lightly trained, trying to hold this vast, complex, powerful topic for an organisation is unfair at best and could be unlawful. We've got to get this right. This has been in the legislation since the 1970s. It's not new. Words like burnout, burnout even goes back to the 1970s as well. So common in professional services, common in people in their 40s. We know quite a lot about this stuff. So it's about turning the hot topics into things that are really right for your organisation. And they've got to be meaningful. They've got to be relevant. So if I'm making bricks for 10 hours a day at a bench with a 45-minute break in the middle, and somebody goes, oh, well, we've got these iPads where you can access, counselling through, the canteen. They're not going to use it. They're going to have a couple of cigarettes, pasty, and go back, listen to their music, go to the loo, and go back to work. But there are good things they can do. And so this one organisation, like a factory environment, they would just stop the lines running for a bit, give everybody tea and biscuits with the one rule that you weren't allowed to talk about work. You don't have to chuck lots of money at this.
Yeah. And specifically for leaders, because you've got advice there and guidance for organisations. For leaders, particularly those leaders that are thinking this does feel big and this does feel scary for me, but I want to try and do more. Where would you kind of advise that they start? What could that first step in the right direction be?
There are two wonderful things that leaders can do. Zero cost, very little time, big impact. One, they can tell their own story. They don't have to include all the medical details. They just say that I can relate to this and I've been through stuff, and they mention some life moments. And it's very helpful for people to know that at this employer, I can reach the top and manage this stuff. Second, almost zero cost, high impact thing you can do is walk the floor and talk to people and look them. I love it. And look them in the eye and go, what's happening for you? What can you tell me about running this organisation so I can factor that into the way I think about it from your point of view? I did a piece of work with Transport for London a bunch of years ago, and the thing I remember about the whole project was one line from somebody, I think he was an engineer out in Acton somewhere, that you can keep all these corporate announcements they keep making, they don't mean anything to me. This organisation has got to realise that it doesn't run the trains. It runs the people that run the trains. And that's very powerful, I think. So getting this right, an organisation that wants to get its numbers right needs to look at the people who do the numbers.
Tom, it's been brilliant to listen and learn from your experience, from the brilliant work that you're doing with organisations, and throughout this, the important work that you're doing with organisations and continue to do. Before we get to the quick fire questions to kind of wrap up this episode, if people want to continue to learn from you, what's the best way of connecting with you?
Yeah, well, look me up on Bamboo Mental Health. That's the website. And I'm on LinkedIn. I've got a TEDx talk out there as well called about workplace mental health. There's another guy called Tom Oxley who does stuff with spinal column. So make sure you get the one about mental health. And I've got loads of free stuff and videos and little tips and all that kind of thing on the website.
Fantastic. And we'll put links to all of that in the episode description. So to finish us off, Tom, our quick fire questions. So starting off, if there's one thing about workplace culture you would like to change, what would that be and why?
Hardwire well-being support, proactive well-being support into manager objectives.
Fantastic. And like you said, what gets measured gets done. So having it in those.
Remember, 80% reduction.
Yeah.
Up to 80%. You do it for safety.
Yeah.
We are doing it for safety.
Yeah. And if there's one myth about leadership that you would like and think needs reimagining, Tom, what would that be?
Well, you don't need to be vulnerable. The vulnerability is a big buzzword. You don't have to have been through tons of stuff to recognize that your people have. You don't have to give them medical details. You don't have to share everything all the time. People don't want that from you. Your people actually want you to have both feet on the hard ground. Just recognize when they tell you what it's like to be in the quicksand and believe them. So this idea of vulnerability, I get it, and it can be a useful technique in a conversation, perhaps. But leaders, stay on your hard ground about this. Do stuff, and it doesn't have to be your story. Listening to other people.
Brilliant advice, because I think that there potentially will be leaders out there that think, I haven't experienced this, I haven't gone through this myself, so does that mean I am kind of hindered in terms of the support? But I think that's a great piece of advice, that there's still support that you can provide by listening, being empathetic, like you said. And then last one, if the challenging one, if there was one word that sums up a thriving workplace culture, what would that be?
Am I allowed to phrase psychological safety? Perhaps it's about sort of a sense like that sort of safety security thing. I'm sorry I haven't got just one word for you. Perhaps it's actually community. And I think we need to move away from community as in, village fete and jam sales, and think about community as in us as a group of humans thriving as a pack, as a tribe, where it feels good to do good work. And it includes problems and challenges and deadlines and difficult market conditions and all those kind of things. But good work is really good for us. And if we can get that right, then we're doing some of the job.
Tom, great place to finish. I really enjoyed that conversation. Found it really interesting as well. So appreciate you giving up your time. And yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Work Reimagined. Huge thanks to Tom for such an open and really important conversation. As always, if you found this episode helpful, then please do like, share and subscribe. It helps keep these conversations going and also helps us reach more people who care about making work better. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the conversation with Tom and how your organisation is approaching mental health. But until next time, thanks for listening.